Hello everyone, coming to you from my bedroom today. My kid is sick, so I will be making this video as short as possible. This is my story from the ages of 5 to 10 as I recall it. Like I said, I do have DID, so there are big gaps in my memory and big gaps in my time frame. Some of the stuff is mixed up, some of it is in chronological order. And the reason for that is I have a trauma disorder from all of this. I want to start by explaining what holding therapy and compression therapy are when used in controversial therapies. Holding therapy and controversial therapies is where a caretaker holds a child stationary against their will and forces prolonged eye contact, whereas compression therapy is where that child, usually between the ages of 2 and 6, is swaddled, held, and forced to endure compression or contact with said caregiver. For me, holding therapy was very traumatic. I probably have autism, and eye contact has always been very hard for me. But because of holding therapy, I can make eye contact. It's just extremely uncomfortable. It feels forced, and it's actually a trigger for me. Because of compression therapy, I cannot actually use weighted blankets for my anxiety because it will trigger full body memory of compression therapy as late as 10 years old and as early as 6 years old, and I don't have a lot of memory leading up to that. Part of my therapy as a child, I was told to love the person I was when I was born. But I never didn't love the person I was when I was born. So that was really confusing to me because I've always been the same person. I just had a different name. But I went through therapy as young as 2 years old telling me that I needed to love Krystal. I needed to love Krystal. I needed to love her. I needed to give her the love that she didn't get as a baby. That said, I went through a lot in that time, including a weighted doll with my approximate birth weight that was given to me. Because for so long I was compared to my birth mother and told that that name was a bad word, essentially, but also told to love my birth self. That was very confusing for me. When I was 8, I actually ripped all of the limbs off of that doll. And the reason for it was because I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't deal with the hypocrisy, and I couldn't understand why the hypocrisy was happening. Connection therapy or attachment therapy, the controversial kind, not the good kind, also known as rage therapy, is a therapy based on the theory that adopted children who don't attach easily are actually born with an innate rage, a rage at their parents that they just can't fix, and the only way to fix it is to express that rage. This includes torturing that child until they explode with rage and rewarding them for that anger. For a long time after that, I did not know anything besides fear and anger. The biggest feeling that I ever felt was fear. Fear that I wasn't going to be good enough. I was confused. I was terrified that I was going to get left. And I was going to continue to be abused. I was constantly poked at, provoked. I had water thrown on me as young. I remember it happening when I was 4 or 5. But because I was just saying no, I would have water thrown at me, poked, prodded, hit, pushed, shoved, physically abused in an attempt to push me over the edge. When I was 7, I was accused of attempted murder of my sister, which was not true. I went to school officials, friends, families. I begged for help and nothing happened. When I was 5, my mom was in a complete rage and I ended up actually calling the police, and I was too scared to tell them what had happened. Well, my adoptive mom happens to be an ex-police officer. When they got there, they told me that I could go to jail for wasting city resources and all this other stuff. I was 5. I was terrified, and I never went to the police again. I was too terrified to talk, and they did not recognize the signs of abuse, and if they did not want to. When I was 7, I was sent to respite care, which is essentially foster care where the parents only give up partial custody of their children for a break from that adopted child. Typically, this is used for foster care, but in California, it is also used for adoptive parents of children that are just too difficult. I was sent there when I was 7. I was there for a week. There was a lot of abuse that I witnessed in that house, and I am still friends with someone who was there for months, and he witnessed a bunch of abuse there as well. But that is not my story to tell. It just validates my story that I was not the only one witnessing that level of abuse. I was either always hungry or never hungry. There was no in between. I never felt truly full. There was no access to food. Like, the food was there, but I always had to ask, and it was a toss-up on how my adoptive parent felt, whether I would actually be able to access that food or not, or what food I was able to access. She got a sick pleasure out of feeding me foods that really made me squirm. Foods like mashed potatoes and pie that I don't eat to this day. It has nothing to do with it being baby food and everything to do with the texture of it. This includes yogurt, applesauce, any of those weird textures. For me, I can't do. Another thing to note is that is an early symptom of autism. During this time, between the ages of 6 and 8, I began walking on my toes, and I wouldn't stop. This usually starts earlier, and I do remember running a lot, and a lot of running is on the ball of your feet and toes, and I never really walked. When I started walking for things like school and like slowing down and having to pay attention, teachers noted that I walked on my toes. My adoptive parents' response was to say I was looking for attention and continue physically abusing me. When I stopped walking on my toes, I started doing this, and it was just a comfort thing. I tipped my head, and I kept it tipped, and I wasn't sure why. Maybe I was trying to make myself smaller. Maybe I don't remember why, but I know that it felt comfortable. When it came to sports, I was only allowed to do the sports in which my mother was a coach. This included swimming and soccer. No matter what sport I did, I was called promiscuous, flirtatious. I was constantly accused of trying to sleep with people as young as 6 years old. When I was 10, I did have a fantasy-like relationship with one of my swim team friends, and it wasn't one that was reciprocated. He was actually one of my biggest bullies. To this day, we are friends, however. We have reconciled our differences and are now friends. But for swim team, at least, I was called promiscuous. I was kicked off the team multiple times for it, and things that other children were doing. It was very odd, very weird, and honestly very humiliating, and that is how my life went from, that is how my life began to unspiral, was as young as 5. For soccer, I started when I was 10, and I was called clumsy, not good, hopeless, never gonna go anywhere, why are we even doing this, etc., etc., and that permeated my belief that I was not good, that I would never be good enough. It wasn't until I had a coach that was not my mom, and they were like, you're actually really good, and she tried to coach me, she put me up age groups, she really tried to help. Thank God for that coach. That coach, I believe, also reported to CPS a lot of the abuse that was happening and kicked my mom off the field entirely. My mom was not allowed to go to any of my games or anything else because of this abuse. In fact, my coach would drive me to the games and drive me home. I do not know if this was because my mom was refusing to take me to practices, which she also did to my siblings. But I do know that was something that happened later in life, that people started recognizing sports as the abuse. This is where it's going to get really deep. This is age 6, and this is where I remember getting the ID. I'm going to tell you a story. During a compression therapy home session, which is basically a session performed by the guardians of the child without a supervising therapist, but at the recommendation of a therapist, so the therapist can say it wasn't performed correctly, even though they have given the parents a step-by-step process. If something goes wrong, the therapist is no longer liable. but it is essentially like homework, only it's given to the parents. In this particular home session, I was 6 years old, swaddled like a baby with the full weight of an adult female on top of me. I felt like my lungs were caving in, my ribs were crushing. I was laying on a hard floor with an adult human on top of me with their full body weight. As I cried, she continued to lick my face. Sensory-wise, that was terrible. I started hyperventilating and kept repeating, "I can't breathe," to which she laughed at me and licked my face again. At this point, I gave up completely. It hurt too much. The humiliation was too much. And I genuinely said, if this is how I die, then I'm ready. In that very moment, I remember that I stopped feeling anything in my body at all. I remember a young woman with short black hair who knelt down and picked me up. She whispered to me, "Shh, I will take it from here." And then I was in a white room, in a white mansion. I could decorate it however I wanted, in any way that I wanted. I could open as many windows as I wanted and do whatever I wanted. But instead, I simply imagined a bed, and it appeared, and so I slept. I woke up when I was 10 years old. The memories that I have within that time frame are as if they happened to a sibling or a friend that I've watched back on a playback tape. One of my adoptive parents once said about these sessions, "You cannot say that it didn't work. You got really angry and you snapped, and then it was like you were a whole different person." Looking back now, I think to myself, no shit, it didn't work. My brain decided at that point that I would never be one person and that I would always have multiple people, because I, as a little 6-year-old, could not withstand the abuse, emotional torture, and physical pain that I was going through. At this time, my alter, my friend, and the person that most often lives with me, Krystal, was created. She is my best friend, and some of you will meet her on this channel. But this is how I came to know what a switch was in dissociative identity disorder. And I thought that this was my imaginary friend. Only I didn't realize other people didn't have whole worlds within their brain that they could escape the most painful parts of their life into. As much as this disorder is not one that I would wish on anybody else, this disorder has saved my life, and I want to give a huge thank you to my best friend, co-host, and alter, Krystal, who has made this channel possible by supporting me and helping me to process each and every episode that I write. But also for being the person who's co-conscious with me as I read it and helping me to continue to make this content. This is her story. This is how she came to be. And this is how I will always remember her as the beautiful black-haired angel who knelt down, picked me up, and put me in a safe place and helped me to escape what to me was unescapable. This is what dissociative identity disorder does, and this is how painful and real this disorder is. Thank you for listening. Thank you for understanding, and thank you for being a part of my journey. To all of the viewers here, I appreciate you so very much. Have a great and wonderful day. Also, side note, if you see child abuse or you see signs of psychological abuse, please call CPS and report it. Even if nothing is done, do your best to report it. We don't want another person to go through what I went through if you can help it. Have a blessed day.